Okay, let's do an unboxing. I received this in the mail today. So let's open this up and slide out the Morrow Project. So we'll take a look at this. This is the 4th edition. So I unboxed the Morrow Project. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. So this arrived in the mail. I purchased a copy of the Morrow Project. It's quite different from what I remember. And I guess the first thing I'm going to talk about is just because I'm a font geek, and unless you've been in typography for a lot, it's most people won't appreciate this. The typography of the Morrow Project sucks. It has a bunch of problems, and perhaps the easiest way to show it is there's way too much white on black, because the book is black and white, which I don't have a problem with it. And the second problem is that every page has these nice little symbols in the center, which make it hard to read. And if a game is hard to read, that is, how can you expect it to be popular? And you run into tables that look like this. If you can just see this, this is a nightmare. It's they thought they would do something that was interesting, and putting something in the center of the book, in the center of a page, that covers, it's light gray, there's too much black on the page, and it makes it difficult to read. And the other thing that they did, as you can see with this, is that they fully justified the text. Let's see here. It's fully justified. Now I went looking, and 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition of the Player's Handbook were fully justified. And then finally, by the 4th and 5th edition, they stopped fully justifying it because it's much easier to read. So let me show you what I mean. 5th edition of Player's Handbook. So the text is called Ragged Right. That it isn't justified on every line, doesn't end at the same place. It's much easier to read. So that's the Player's Handbook. The best comparison that I can come up with between the Morrow Project is probably Traveller. The big, massive 5th edition Traveller rules are laid out very similar. They're, in one sense, they're easier to read because the paragraphs are shorter. But there's an awful lot of black on white in this also. I mean, white on black. In here, there's still an awful lot of that on each page. With Traveller, the paper is better because it's at least I didn't buy the hardback version of the Morrow Project. But I'm sort of discouraged because when you first pick up the book, it's a little, and you start thumbing through it, it's hard to read. The second thing is when you start reading, the foreword is okay, and then you get to the confidential memo. And I'm sure they thought it would be nice to make it look like a typewritten document, but it's hard to read. And that's the problem. I mean, the complaint I have with the Player's Handbook, which is a completely legitimate complaint with the Player's Handbook, is the choice of colors. They're full color, but the page numbers are almost illegible. You can't, let's try and get this in so you can see the page numbers. The page numbers are light gray, or they're a lighter color. They're not dark enough. So the page numbers in the player's handbook should be darker. The page numbers here are nicely set in a little circle, if you can see that. So you can see the page numbers. From an architectural point of view, the other problem with the book, and I think it's a problem with what they did. This is a relatively hefty book, which is fine. And then you get to the classified material. Again, way too much black. But to play the game, they say you really need a copy of the book. This should be divided. This should be the player's handbook. And this should be what they call the project director's handbook. It should be split almost in half into two pieces. One, it would cut down the cost for a player because you cannot play the game without the full book, which puts it up there too expensive. So these are critiques that I have just about the game. I mean, it should be easier to you shouldn't be required to play the project director's or GM or whatever you want to call it piece. You should be able to separate that out so that they don't start thumbing through it, so that they can just be a player. And then the project director should be just a project director. The book isn't that thick, but it's just it would cut things down. It would be nice if an electronic version of this was available, but I also find that would allow them to have allowed them to do color, but the problem that they have is it's just too much gray on gray. I just looked through this, and the tables they remind me of the Traveler tables in the big 5th edition of Traveler. And yeah, that's fine. Reading through the game, it's an interesting. It uses 46 plus 6, so yeah. So you have scales between 10 and 40. It's a little bit different approach for that, and percentiles. So you don't need any D8s or D12s or things like that. You need percentiles and 46. So you need a bunch of D6 dice. That's the combat. Like I said, this is just a preliminary reading through this. I've started to read through it, and my complaint was it's hard to read. They used the interesting thing is that they tended to use it parts of the introduction, which I've been reading through. They use a sans serif font because they thought it looked good, which is great for headings, but it's not a body font, as the typography of the introduction is kind of bad. That's bad. And then by page 18, it changes over to a normal font, a normal body font, which makes it much easier to read, though it flips back and forth between the fonts, which would normally be okay, except that there's way too much sans serif. It's harder to read. I'm the type of person who likes to be able to read this, and it's just a hard to read book, which is sort of disappointing. The advantage with the first edition, and this is just based upon recollection, is it looked like an Army technical manual. And for better or worse, Army technical manuals are designed to be read at a fairly low reading level, and they're designed to be easy to understand. And like I said, I don't have any Army technical manuals recently, so it would be interesting to do some comparison, but I'm pretty sure that the typography was simpler than what they did here. And by putting all these pictures in there, it's a very interesting. By the way, I'll be comparing this to Gamma World. I bought a copy of Gamma World, which should arrive tomorrow. So this is my unboxing and first impressions. And I think it's expensive and hard to read for what you get. It should have been split into a player's handbook and a project manager's handbook, because that's the difference. It's very different in one sense. I mean, you have all the weapons. It covers, all kinds of damages, and you have everything from an M47 Dragon and the tow missile, and you have a whole bunch of, you have some interesting weapons here that are kind of powerful. It doesn't go anything really wild. No real armor vehicles, which is sort of a shame. You have their recon vehicle, but that's okay. I mean, I can understand, and it wouldn't be that difficult to add an armored vehicle. I mean, they come up with a Commando Scout and a Commando Ranger, but they don't really have any. I was in armor, but they do have an interesting, like a water purification trailer. You have a whole bunch of interesting features in the Morrow Project, and it's a different kind. It's a much more gritty kind of game than Gamma World. And they go through the creature modifications and things like that, and you don't run into the really wild monster type creatures per se, because it's more, like I said, it's more trying to figure out where you're at after 150 years coming out of your vault. And I like the comparison. Somebody said it would be like Fallout 4 if Fallout 4 was 150 years and the technology was not based upon the 50s, but based upon the, I guess it would be the 70s or 80s, maybe 2000s, because you do have certain things there. It's an interesting book. I may try and run one of these, or actually I may want to try and play one, see if I can find a game to play. But like your thoughts. What do you think of my review, my unboxing? This isn't a complete review. This is just an unboxing of the Morrow Project. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate all your comments. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. I appreciate both forms of feedback. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, you can click on the icon on the left. If you're interested, there's more content on the right.